You are someone who operates at the intersection of trauma, relationships. Give me your thoughts on the Jonah Hill situation.
Right. So I'm all about boundaries. I'm a very big advocate of having boundaries, and I think it's something particularly men need to exercise in order to maintain their masculinity and their dominance in some regards of the relationships. Not in every regard, but in some leadership skills, you need boundaries. We need boundaries with everybody in our lives. There's nothing unhealthy about having boundaries. But here's the problem that not just Jonah, a lot of men have. And this particularly happens amongst men with low self-esteem. So this is why you'll see men who have really low self-esteem. What happens is in the beginning stages of relationships, they're afraid to effectively communicate what they expect in a partner. They're so in awe of their partner and they're just so excited to have a partner that they forget their own standards of what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior. So they go into the relationship recognizing that this woman may have certain characteristics that they won't be comfortable with in the long run. But because their low self-esteem and their ego is craving attention and love, they ignore their boundaries. But boundaries always, just like when you eat badly and you eat something unhealthy, it catches up on your body. When you have unhealthy boundaries, it catches up on your emotional connections. And eventually what happens is a person, as they get more and more attached, the boundaries start screaming at them. The things that they ignored, the red flags that they ignored and not comfortable with, start screaming at them. And then they explode. And as a result, it does come across as controlling behavior. What I found so interesting is the internet was so divided. There was all these men being like, yeah, come on, set boundaries. This is what modern women are like. Here's what modern men are like. They take women that they're so excited about and so in awe of, ignore all of the red flags, and they beg her to abide by their boundaries. So you'll see men dating girls who have like OnlyFans or the Instagram pictures of bikinis. They're begging these girls to take them on a date or begging these girls to be with them. The moment they get into a relationship, then they want to exercise boundaries. It's too late. You signed an imaginary contract the day you invested in each other, that you accept each other for who they are. Now that your insecurities are creeping in, you don't have the right to now undo the damage that you set the foundations for, is what I was thinking. What were you thinking, Chris? I'm actually really interested to know what you think about this situation. I actually don't know what you think.
Yeah, so I think first off, the internet's response is way more interesting than the actual situation, because it really does. It's like that image of the dress where some people saw black and blue and some people saw gold and green or something.
Yeah.
People are seeing very different scenarios here. From my side, I think your assessment's really accurate, which is setting boundaries and having these sorts of concerns or limitations around a relationship are broadly acceptable. The difference is if you establish a routine and you allow somebody to become attached with one particular set of rules, and then over time, as your feelings for them get involved, and you have to, you're right. It's almost like the boundaries are very difficult for you to ignore because of how much you care about the other person. And Jonah Hill has had a glow up. I mean, he's a very different looking dude now as a skinny guy compared with as a really, really fat guy. But he's risen in status a lot over the last sort of 10 to 15 years. Definitely wouldn't have had a lot of status as he was coming up. So self-esteem, I imagine, is going to be a massive problem for him. And I can completely see why he would feel insecure about these things. The problem is allowing a partner to get into a rhythm of a relationship. And this is what most guys that have been commenting on this, I think, have got right, which is it is completely within your rights to say, these are the things that I don't want my partner to do. Is it a bit cringe? Does it suggest that you've got low self-esteem? Does it suggest that you are maybe a little bit overly sensitive, that you could do with doing a little bit of self-work? All of these things, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
But by allowing yourself to get into a relationship, to establish a particular rhythm with them, and then to kind of do this switcheroo change, I don't know how long they'd been together, but it was quite a while. That, I think, that's what really causes a problem. Because this wouldn't have been a story if during the first 6 weeks of dating each other, Jonah Hill had said, look, these are the things that I feel uncomfortable about. How do you feel about this? What everybody is noticing is the change, the pivot in direction.
And chances are, if they had that conversation early, she would have said, well, I agree with you. I'm not the partner for you because I'm a surfing instructor. This is what I do for a living. I completely respect your boundaries. I will respect what you have to say, and then we can part ways. But to do it later on, when you finally got the confidence, is basically selling a false sense of yourself to your partner. And unfortunately, this is what a lot of men, when they have the glow up, and same with women when they have the glow up, our self-esteem is pretty much established by the time we're 14, 15 years old. So your childhood experiences and your high school experiences tell you what your self-esteem are. So when you are 25, 35, you might look great, but you're still that 14-year-old boy that can't believe you got this surfing model to have sex with you. So what happens is you let the thing slide, and then you realize that you're not good enough because your core belief still sees you as that 14-year-old guy, and you think in order to feel like the relationship's more secure, you have to control it. To make everything feel more secure, you feel like micromanaging. But the reality is, it's all down to the boundaries you accepted in the beginning. And it doesn't mean that, okay, I understand people change and you might need to change up the parameters of your relationship, but you shouldn't be making ultimatums. Ultimatums, nobody really respects, because truly, most people who make ultimatums aren't really going to do anything if you don't abide by them. Ultimatums is a fear tactic. It's to scare your partner into submission. Whereas when you have kind of established that you will leave whenever the boundaries are crossed, you don't need to make ultimatums. You just watch their behavior. You let them know what you prefer, but you watch their behavior accordingly, and then you leave accordingly. But ultimatums are almost a cry for help.
What do you think about the people saying that this is abuse?
On which part? Because
The messages, the restriction of, I don't want you to have photos of you in a bikini with your ass out. I don't want you to be surfing with guys. I don't want you to have friendships with people from your recent, like, wild past.
Mm-hmm. I would be very cautious of using the word abuse, even though I don't agree with Jonah. I think it is an extreme attempt to kind of vilify. He is actually what I see as a cry for help. When we have intense insecurities, it then manifests itself as controlling behavior. But that controlling behavior is a direct correlation to how attached they are to you and how inadequate they feel about the relationship, either because of their self-esteem or how you've made them feel. So when we use the word abuse, I would be careful of using that, because abuse signals that person is doing it maliciously, consciously, and has been doing it throughout the relationship. But what this may have been is his insecurities got the best of him, and he lashed out in a way that it isn't appropriate. But I would be mindful of the word abuse. What do you think? Do you think it's abuse?
Abuse is a very, very strong term, and again, concept creep has managed to turn everything into racism, or everything into homophobia, or everything into bigotry, and everything into trauma and abuse. I'm not sure what the definition of it is. I think it's a shitty move by Jonah Hill, and I think that people who have low self-esteem do loads and loads of strange things that to them is just insecurity burbling inside of them, and like a volcano, it cracks out through a fissure, and if the pressure has built for a long time, then that can happen. I haven't watched it, but that Stutz Netflix documentary, which I think is between Jonah and his therapist, shows that Jonah has been doing a good bit of self-work. But if there is this source code, this sort of base layer of low self-esteem, insecurity, sense of insufficiency, it seems like what you're suggesting is there is an upper bound on how much he's going to be able to move that, even with a fantastic therapist, which I guess he'll even feel that. He'll feel the discomfort of, who am I to be this world famous actor that feels like he's insecure around this girl? So there's an awful lot going on.
Yeah, but do you think that her reaction is a bit abusive, like exposing it to the public when we know that there's millions of people now judging this person who's already emotionally vulnerable? I would argue that's more abusive. I would argue that when you know somebody's in the public eye, and the amount of people that are now going to judge him, and the potential effect it's going to have on their career, when it could be resolved between the two of you, do you think that's more abusive and narcissistic?
More abusive and narcissistic. That's a really interesting one. Certainly, the timing of it seems strange. The Jonah and his new fiance have just had a child. The ex-girlfriend said that she had held this off so that she didn't disrupt the pregnancy. But I mean, the choices between disrupting a pregnancy or disrupting a newborn. So, like pick your poison there. I'm not convinced that it's right to air this out in this way. But then on the flip side, is this a useful example for guys who have a low self-esteem to understand that it is important to understand how setting boundaries works? The problem that you have is we're working very, very hard to make the ex's motivations for doing this into something that's like virtuous. I think maybe you could say it helps other girls and women to feel like they can leave a relationship where the partner sets unreasonable boundaries. But the point is that these requests weren't insane. They were maybe overbearing, insecure, and poorly timed, and all of that nuance gets lost. And it's not even the ex's job to have a good idea of how public relations works for some A-list celebrity and to work out every different permutation of the second, third, fourth order effect. So it's just, as with everything, it's super messy. And there's a second set of screenshots that she just put out that came out today, and those include Jonah replying to her saying, using screenshots or like replying with screenshots and posting screenshots to manipulate me makes me feel like shit. That screenshot is from August 2022. But what people are doing is they're taking that screenshot and presuming he's texted her recently about this most recent. It's not. It's due to her sending back to him his own screenshots in a private message thread. Then there's this other stuff that seems like he was sexting the ex only maybe 6 weeks or a little bit before he maybe got with the new girl, which is now the baby mama and fiance. So it's all just messy. There's misinterpretation.
Can I apologize? Because then maybe I was misinformed because me stupidly thought that they were together recently. I didn't know how badly she timed it. So then in that case, if I now know that she was actually his ex from some time back, she's the abuser. She's the abuser. And this is why she's the abuser. If you react in the moment, it's a cry for help. If you react a year later, it's a cry for attention. There's a big difference. When you're crying for help, you're genuinely on your knees and you need people to know. And that moment I can understand. A bit like, when you hear footballers' wives expose them for abuse. But when it's a year later, it's so premeditated. And it's such a way of casting a dark shadow on what could be a glorious time for him now. She's definitely the abuser in this relationship.
What would you say to the people that would push back? Sadia, this is, no matter whether it was 1 day after or 1 year after, this is an appropriate opportunity to bring to light poor behavior from a partner in a relationship. This is going to be a landmark event which explains and shows to other women about exactly what is and is not acceptable behavior. And this girl has done a thing which helps the world to see exactly what this sort of guy is like and how this woman has dealt with it.
That would be somewhat believable if she aired this or privately to the person that she believes he's now in a relationship with, because then there's no narcissistic reinforcement coming towards her. There is no victim mentality. There is no outcry of public, because narcissistic behavior, they love getting everybody to agree with them. There's none of that. There's no collective mindset. It's purely, I want to help. And then you can first start there. If that person's not heeding to your advice and then you go a bit more public over time, I can slightly understand that. But this does not signal that at all. So that's why I just feel like when it's between the two of you, or if it's in the moment, I completely understand. But if it's a year or time later, to expose somebody and degrade somebody is very different to expose your own traumas and trying to seek help. The two things are very, very different. And it sounds like very selfish motives. What do you think about that? Do you think it's selfless?
I definitely don't think it's selfless. I think no matter what you believe, this woman has now pigeonholed herself as either a card-carrying domestic abuse survivor, there's going to be sexual crime survivor. Like, she's going to make herself a spearhead for women who have been mistreated in relationships, and that's now this lady is locked onto those train tracks for probably the next 2 years of her life. Maybe there's a book deal out of it. Maybe there's, her Instagram's doubled since I last checked it. It went from maybe like sort of the 60K up to, I think it's at 150 now. It's going to be at way more in the future.
And it's important to note that the amount of kind of subjective focus narcissism involves, victim mentality is the same way. The amount you have to kind of focus on you and prioritize you that is required in narcissism is exactly the same in a victim. Somebody who over-identifies as a victim displays the same level of self-indulgence as a narcissist, and which is why I try and get both of them to remove those labels, because they're not good for either of us. They don't create any responsibility and accountability on both ends. The lack of accountability and responsibility on both the victim and narcissist are almost identical, which is why they require the same level of self-indulgence, and which is why we try and change it to, I wouldn't call her a victim of abuse. I think it's an insult to people who are actually been abused to suggest that she's an abuser, been abused. But I do think, of course, Jonah should have been more mindful when picking a partner, and hopefully he's chosen a partner who does abide by his boundaries, and it's a learning curve we all go through. But I think trying to galvanize the public into supporting your kind of victimhood is the biggest signal of narcissism we can actually find in modern day society.
Every single morning for over 3 years now, I've started my day the exact same way, which is with Element in water. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, and it is the best hydration drink that I've ever found. It tastes fantastic, it's super refreshing. Orange is just the most OP flavor in the world. It's absolutely phenomenal, and it helps to play a critical role in reducing muscle cramps and fatigue. It regulates your appetite, it optimizes brain health, and it helps curb cravings. They're also the exclusive hydration partner to Team USA weightlifting and relied on by tons of Olympic athletes and everyday high performers all around the world. Also, there is a no BS, no questions asked refund policy where you can buy a box completely risk-free, and if you do not like it for any reason, they will give you a refund during an unlimited duration, and you don't even need to return the box. That's how confident they are that you'll love it. Element are giving away a free sample pack of all 8 flavors with your first box if you go to the link in the description box below, or drinklmnt.com/MW. That's drinklmnt.com/MW. What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full, unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe.